Happy Advent, everyone. It's hard to believe we are on the Thursday of the first week of Advent already, which means we are literally 21 days away from Christmas. Anybody ready? We got one. Yeah, okay. Yeah, I'm of the no pile as well. Well, I am Marcy Fessler, president of the First Friday Club Board, as most of you know. Welcome to our presentation today in the name of our officers, board members, and committees. We are still in our 20th anniversary season. I'm not letting that go. That is so exciting. Thank you to everyone who has been giving us monthly donations. We've been putting names up on our opening slideshow. My gratitude is just, every time I get that list from our treasurer, I just get a bubbly feeling of so much gratitude for everything that you guys have been donating and helping us out. I appreciate that so much. Couple reminders. Check your cell phones, make sure they're silenced. If you have a smartwatch, check that too. If you need religious education hours, the form is at the welcome table. On your tables this month, we included the email list. If you are not receiving emails from us, please give us your email and add to the list. We know that it sounds like it's going to be an interesting winter this year. So if we need to cancel or make adjustments to a program, we want to make sure we get that out to you as soon as we possibly can, okay? Another place for that is Facebook. Make sure friend you have following us on Facebook. Check out our YouTube channel. That's where all our links are up. Our links are taking about 3 weeks now to get up there, so be patient, but they'll be up there. Our videos will be up. Next month's presentation, this is going to be an interesting one. I'm kind of excited. January 8th, 1 week later, so nobody has to come out on New Year's Day. So January 8th is going to be an experience for us. Sister Jean Thurin, Humility of Mary sister, is going to present Jesus, the Recipe for Life, portrayed in mime, and narrated by Sister Marianne Spangler. So this will be a very interesting one. I hope everyone will be able to attend. Reservations will be due like right before, that week before New Year's if you can. Join me in thanking Barb Zorn for sponsoring Professor Carucci today. Thank you, Barb. Professor Carucci will entertain questions. Grateful for that. I put in a request for, a little Bruce Springsteen Christmas music, and I don't think it's going to happen, but I'm hopeful. So please let us bow our heads, remembering our presenter, all those who have gathered in this room, those who have unable to join us today, and for all the prayers that we hold in our hearts. In a spirit of praise and thanks, God, our Creator, you sustain our lives through the gift of your Spirit and the following of Jesus. Stir in us the desire to learn, to love, to serve more generously, to act on behalf of justice and truth. We ask these blessings in your holy name. Amen. I invite Barb.
Thank you, Marcy, and again, welcome to everyone. Thanks for coming out on this cold day. Saxophonist, composer, and educator, Dr. Carucci serves as the director of the Dana School of Music and the University Theater at Youngstown State University. He has previously held leadership and teaching positions at Eastern Kentucky University, Lincoln Memorial University, and the University of Minnesota at Morris. An accomplished performer, Joe has appeared across the U.S., Canada, Japan, China, and Colombia with artists such as The Temptations, The Four Tops, one of my favorites, Patti LaBelle, Christian McBride, and Eric Alexander. He has released 3 studio recordings, including Stories and Melodies. His compositions are published through Walrus Publishing and Jazz Line Publications. Dr. Carucci is also a frequent presenter at national and international conferences on improvisation, jazz pedagogy, musicians' health, and arts leadership. He holds degrees from the Eastman School of Music and the University of Kentucky. Dr. Carucci is clearly a person who embraces the arts and understands the importance of arts in a healthy society. From the viewpoint of our local church, the Dana School of Music has always been an important element contributing to the beauty of our most important prayer, the Mass. Since its beginnings, Dana grads and Dana students have been a wonderful part of our diocese as directors of music, cantors, soloists, choir members, organists, pianists, instrumentalists, and teachers. What you do, Dr. Carucci, is very important to us. It's good to have you here. Thank you. I give you Dr. Joe Carucci.
Well, thank you, Barb and Marcy and Ray and you all for the invitation. I'm very grateful. I'm also grateful for the community that we share, all of the musicians that you share with the Dana School of Music. It's really wonderful. It's a great way to blend our communities and be able to share more. I thought I'd start today with a little bit of playing, and then we'll get a whole lot of words, and then a little bit more playing. It'll be kind of like a word sandwich. Playing being the bread, the words hopefully, probably too many of them, but so be it. Sound good? Beautiful. Thank you. Name those tunes? You know. Paper Moon was the second one. What was the first one? Recognize it? I Thought About You. There's another one off of those classic Frank Sinatra recordings for those like late 1950s, early 60s. Baby Blue Eyes. And Songs for Swingin' Lovers. So yeah, I know these songs from when I was a child, right? I was a little guy hearing Sinatra, hearing Rosemary Clooney, right? Or Tony Bennett. They refer to these songs as the Great American Songbook. So yeah, like I said, these had an integral part in my childhood, and quite frankly, all the way up, growing up through being a musician and a professional musician and what I bring to the stage. So I'll get back to that in a little while. So I appreciate the introduction. Thank you so much. I'm personally, my name's Joe Carucci, we got that. I'm personally very, very driven by the belief that the arts are an absolutely essential part for every society. Everyone has the ability to participate and benefit from the unifying impact of the arts. And some might question why I might say something like that about music and the arts, but I do believe they are essential. This fulfills a basic biological and psychological need that cannot otherwise be met. Music is needed to reach the kind of a peak physical and mental health for every individual. Music and singing has impacted our body structure in the evolution of the human being. We've been creating chamber music for over 40,000 years. And we know this because of the hieroglyphics on caves that go back that far. We've seen pictures of people not just playing music, but together. It's a community event. So it's been a social event for 40,000 years. And last night I laughed as I said this to an audience at Carols and Cocoa, because I kept thinking to myself, here in our music world, in higher education, we look at about 2,500 years of music, and that's our music curriculum. Whoa. What about the 38,000 years prior to that? What could we learn as a human race about our being? So I believe, and I think it is true, that music meets a community need, which is again tied to human, biological, and psychological needs. It builds empathy, unity, trust, cooperation, and emotional intelligence. And that's why music. I'm the director of Dana School of Music, and the University Theater is an amazing group of musicians, actors, technicians, composers, audio engineers, artists, and just all around beautiful people. In the mid-90s, I attended the Eastman School of Music. That was for my undergraduate. And when I got there, I was already steeped in a world of practicing. I was practicing about 2 hours a day as a high schooler, sometimes a little more, sometimes a little less. When I got to Eastman, I truly felt like the little fish in this big ocean of amazing musicians, and I had to up my game. So for the first 2 years at Eastman, I was practicing somewhere between 6 and 8 hours a day, just on average. It was pretty intense, enough that I bothered my hands. I wasn't doing it really correctly at first. I had to learn that, and so I dove really deeply into the practice of practice. How am I gonna learn the most? And at the same time, I was immersed in these amazing performances, kind of like we're in right now. Like, I feel like I have a performance every night that I'm going to attend. But I was going constantly to see people perform, and I was seeing people play music for extended periods of time without opening their eyes. That was something I hadn't particularly seen before. I was seeing people who would sit down to play a Beethoven sonata, and the eyes would roll back in their head. I was like, whoa, what's going on here? What is going on in the moment when they're performing? Or even just watching a guitar soloist. Like as a saxophonist, I've got something in my mouth. I can't vocalize. But to watch a guitar player improvise a solo and sing along with that solo, clearly his entire being has attached itself to that music, and I had to figure that out. So I went into this deep dive. So Ray and I exchanged some emails early on, and my idea was to have music cognition or something along these lines, and I attached it to society, and it became much more personal as I went along. So I hope you'll enjoy this journey. I thought I would take a quick second and give you a little bit of a rundown on what we're gonna cover here. Hopefully you'll be able to see my train of thought, and then we can open things up for some questions. We're going to start today talking a little bit about information processing, and we're going to talk about skill acquisition. And with that, we're talking really about some neurological processes as well as some psychological processes. And with that, we're going to talk about the cognitive process of performing. What is going on inside a musician when they're performing in the moment? That'll lead us to a little discussion on the state of flow. And every time I think about these kind of things, I land in a different place. So I sometimes have done this discussion for jazz musicians, and we talk about how we're going to eventually take this and build an improvisational language. Or sometimes I've taught it to folks that are trying to build a separate, different kind of skill on their instrument. We might talk about something like that. With this group, I figured we're probably not all musicians here. So I took a little bit of a different take on it. And I thought it would be great if we could learn how to apply this knowledge to the process of listening and experiencing music. Can we use this information to raise our experience when we are absolutely listening to music? And how can we take this information and help us to become better people? So that's where we're going to go from there. I'm going to use, I'm going to probably do this by posing questions when we get to that portion. And I do this a little bit because I am a teacher. And if I gave you all the answers, I wouldn't be doing my job. So therefore, I'll pose some questions at the end, which will be hopefully something for you to take away, or maybe something that you'll have questions about. We'll dive in. When we talk about information processing, we're talking about two separate tracks on how we can process information in the moment. We have an explicit track, and that explicit track is rule-based. Okay, this is tied to our conscious awareness. This is kind of a buffer to our reflexes. Okay? And where is this happening? This is happening in the prefrontal cortex, which we can see here in green. Okay? This is the part of our brain that separates us from other animals. Right? This is our reasoning part of our brain. We also have an implicit track in order to process information. And this track is considered skill or experience-based. It's not accessible to the conscious awareness. This is our reflexes. They say about 95% of what we do every day is in that realm. Only 5% is in our conscious awareness. That's kind of crazy. But I'm not paying attention to what my feet are doing. They're just moving right now, right? There's an example. So just looking at this, real quick, the implicit track being reflexes, that's based in our basal ganglia. And so what I did was I asked for the limbic system, which is besides the prefrontal cortex, what we're looking at here. And the basal ganglia here in the middle is right in the center. You see that? Good. Well, what else is processed right in the center of our brain? This is called our reptilian brain, right? This is our emotions. fight, flight, freeze is right here, right? It's an emotional place in our brain, that center of the brain. Reptilian brain, the oldest part of our brain. So just looking at this and what we might be able to take away from it, our explicit system of processing information is our rule-based. This is imperative. This is absolutely important for learning music. But when we're performing music in the moment, it's actually the implicit part. It's these reflexes that we're trying to build. So we're going to come back to this thought as we go. We have a similar system when we talk about learning a skill, which makes sense. Okay, that they're called something different, but the tracks are very similar. Okay, so when we're learning a skill, and this is any skill, this could be shooting a basketball, hitting a baseball, typing. When we're learning a skill, we have two tracks. We have an emotional track, and we have a cognitive track. Our emotional track, to learning a skill, that tells us something. We have complex emotions. They're processed in the limbic system, which again is located on the inner part of the brain. Again, emotion makes sense. What else is there? Well, the long-term memory is there. And the long-term memory being where we're going to store our reflexes. Yeah? So this track will become a little bit more pertinent as we talk about memory. Talk a little bit about the cognitive track, though. And this is an important one. The cognitive track is processed first in our prefrontal lobe here, and then it shifts to something called the homunculus, okay, which is this motor sensory cortex in the middle. Okay, and that's going to be where we are going to process our cognitive track. And that's a funny picture. When we talk about a homunculus, we are talking about a portion of our brain, the motor sensory cortex. It's something that falls between our frontal and parietal lobes. It's often referred to as the little man. And this is key to processing and building skills in our long-term memory. So what happens in our cognitive track? We are going to reason a movement in our frontal lobe. Then it's going to be held in the homunculus, the section over here, wherever those muscles are represented. And you can see the muscles are represented. This, let's say, is the left side. So there's going to be your right side muscles. You can see they're not all represented equally. Like check out the face muscles, right? So we're going to reason the movement. We're going to send it to our motor cortex. And it's going to be held there momentarily while that movement is executed. Now, repetition of this makes it more efficient, and it's going to mean that the motion moves from the homunculus into the inner brain where we have our reflexes. So when I was a little fifth grader, and I picked up my saxophone, and I had to learn my C scale, I first thought to myself, C, D, E, right? And these muscles in my homunculus grew. They literally got bigger, right? This is an elastic brain. It's growing and shrinking. It got bigger as I'm thinking each of those. The more repetition, we'll talk about myelin in a moment, but the more repetition, that became a sequence that could move to my inner brain. It becomes a reflex, and I certainly don't think of C, D, E, F, and G when I play that anymore. Right? I don't think about notes at that point, right? It grows, 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 grows. I get that down and it becomes a reflex, and it shrinks. and it then makes room for the next growth. And here we have our elastic brain, and here we have that cycle that can bring us to lifelong learning. So we do have one bit that we should mention. Again, this is tied to our repetition. If we repeat muscle memory, we build something called a myelin sheath around the axon in our brain. Now, repetition is going to build this. It's going to get thicker. The thicker that myelin sheath is, the synapses in our brain can fire faster, allows for speedier processing, and allows that information to get to our reflexes. Good? So a quick shift. We're going to go back. We'll do a review in a minute. There'll be a test afterwards. We're going to talk a little about memory. And again, all connected. We'll bring that back in a moment. Our long-term memory, short-term memory, and working memory are our three portions of memory that we want to discuss. Our long-term memory is the brain's ability to store information for extended periods from days to a lifetime and retrieve it later. It includes both facts and events, which are often referred to as declarative memory, and skills and habits, which are referred to as procedural memory. The fun part about the long-term memory is it potentially has, bless you, an unlimited capacity. And it's absolutely crucial for learning, but more retaining knowledge for the long term. This is processed in our limbic system, again in the inner brain. The strength of the long-term memory and the ability to access it is absolutely essential for quality music making in the moment. Our short-term memory is the temporary storage system for information that is being actively processed. It's not doing the active processing. It's storing the memory so it can be processed. It's usually holding information for about 15 to 30 seconds. This is immediate for things like short-term tasks. When I just played that little pattern on the saxophone, I needed something to start it off. Bang, it got there. Starting a sentence, remembering a phone number. Those are the kinds of things. Again, this is processed from our prefrontal to our, what's going to be our homunculus, the motor sensory cortex. The goal of skill acquisition is to move information from the short-term to the long-term memory. And now we know we have two ways to do it. We have our emotional track, which means that if we can tie a skill to an emotion, we can internalize that skill faster. That's important. We also know that no matter how long it takes, using repetition, the technical possibilities have just become limitless. And I loved learning that. When I figured that out, this became an infinite puzzle. It's never going to end. I have no intention of ending it. I will always be trying to solve something on the saxophone. That's a nice place to be. And again, it was a really eye-opening moment when I got to realize, oh, anything's possible. There was a time when I used to play a lot of notes when I realized that I built up a lot of technique. I've since changed my approach to performance, but that was a real focus I had, was building that technique for a long time. So we have our long-term memory, our short-term memory, and we have our working memory. And even just looking at the working memory, I get a little panicked. Like, if that's what's happening every moment, like, oh my God, that's monkey brain, right? It's like virtual insanity. What is working memory? Working memory is the brain system that allows you to temporarily hold, analyze, and manipulate the information. This is essential for complex tasks like learning or problem solving or reasoning. It's held in the dorsolateral prefrontal cortex, which is really number 8 up here. Okay? Now, if my brain does this when I'm performing, I'm going to be in trouble. Okay, I'm going to be distracted much too easily. Right? Performing music, we want to bypass this prefrontal cortex. We don't want to be analyzing and manipulating the music in the moment. There is a individual, Csikszentmihalyi. He wrote a book in 1991. It was published, called Flow. He describes the state of flow as the state in which people are so involved in an activity that nothing else seems to matter. This is that moment, not just in music, right? You can see it like back in the day when Tiger Woods couldn't miss. There was the state of flow, right? Kobe Bryant, when he would just bang down threes, nobody could stop him. There's the state of flow. Cool? When I would watch that freshman piano player, eyes roll back, there was the state of flow. As musicians, we need to access all the short-term and the long-term memory, and we need complete control of our attention, but without the processing and judging that happens during the working memory in the dorsolateral prefrontal cortex. This allows us to experience a maximum amount of focus in the moment. Csikszentmihalyi calls this the state of hypofrontality that brings about the inhibition of the explicit state. We need to inhibit the rules-based state so that we can process things implicitly with our reflexes. Csikszentmihalyi talks about there being 9 traits that occur in the state of flow. And we're going to come back to these when we learn a little bit of how we can apply this in a bit. But I think they're important. I add one at the end, and it's just my personal one. I didn't put it on here because I don't think Csikszentmihalyi would approve. But forget about it. So there are clear goals when you're in the state of flow. There are clear goals every step of the way. There is immediate feedback to your actions. There's a balance between challenge and skill. In lessons, we're talking about how there's a lot of one-on-one individual coaching in music. I talk to my students about this being the liminal zone. Okay, this is that zone that's just above your comfort level, but it's not so far you're not going to be able to do it. And if you can find that spot, again, you just open that incredible lifelong learning loop where you're going to be able to keep progressing. Action and awareness are merged. Distractions are excluded from consciousness. There is no worry of failure. Self-consciousness disappears. The sense of time becomes distorted. The activity becomes autotelic, and the one I add is that your values become aligned. And from my experience, and I'll just touch on it now, if they are not, it becomes a distraction and a disruption to flow. It sounds like a great place to live, right? We could live right in that zone and it'd be just wonderful. As a musician, we use the ability to access the state of flow to tell a complex story, our story, someone else's story, a composer, abstract ideas, realistic representations, while simultaneously processing other people's stories. All music in the state of flow is spontaneous, even with music in front of us. We are still reacting spontaneously to sights, sounds, and feels mostly, but our senses. We're responding to input from other musicians. We are responding from input from the audience. You can dig further, right? The monitors and the microphones and the acoustics, all of those things impact a performance. A performance can incorporate all of our experiences. It's a very vulnerable state for someone to be in because it will never be perfect. It's spontaneous. But it is always spontaneous if you can access the state of flow. So really quickly, that was a lot. A quick review. There's an implicit or reflexes-based track to processing and an explicit rule-based track to processing. The goal of acquiring a skill means that someone is going to move information from the short-term to the long-term memory, either using an emotional or a cognitive or a repetition track. The working memory, an analysis and manipulation of information in the moment, can be distracting when in the moment making music. By bypassing the working memory and the prefrontal cortex, this is going to lead to the state of flow. So I mentioned, I realize that we're not all musicians in this room, and I also don't believe that we need to be in order to participate and really enjoy the art of music. So we'll start with just a quick discussion on how we might be able to apply some of this information as a listener. We know that we relate to music through an emotional experience. We just learned that was one of the tracks. So can we think of an emotional moment in life? And what was the soundtrack? It doesn't need to be a musical soundtrack. Can you access that feeling? Now let's take a step further. Can you put that feeling with another piece of music? Or another skill? We also know that we relate to music that is familiar to us, that we've experienced. What did your parents listen to? What music are you accustomed to hearing at church? What music do you listen to the most? The process of improving your musical or your artistic experience involves being conscious of your own culture and background in all aspects of your life. Being conscious of your culture, background, religious identity, age, culture, lifestyle, birthplace, childhood experiences. Can we use the familiar music to us to systematically expand our musical vocabulary, our listening vocabulary? This will bring us back to the state of flow and how that process might be able to help us with our listening experience. If we know the musicians are exploring the state of flow, might this help us better appreciate their music? The first one I kind of just touched on, the balance between challenge and skill. I mentioned I talk about my students, that's the liminal zone, that's that zone just out of your comfort level. Can we expose ourselves and our children to music systematically that can improve their experience? Can we use the conceptual model and familiarity to grow our listening vocabulary? For example, I played you two songs that were written in the 1930s, but they're from the 1950s American, Great American Songbook. At the end, I'm going to play a bossa nova. Bossa nova is from Brazil, around the same time period, but no matter. They're harmonic, and they're melodic, and their structure are very, very similar. But a bossa nova has a much different rhythmic approach. The similarities might bring us to this different style of music. And if we like it and we can get attracted to it, hopefully our curiosity will lead us further. So maybe you'll enjoy the 1950s songbook, and then, oh, this doesn't stretch my ears too far. Here's a bossa nova, and the next thing you know, you're going to be going home tonight and you're going to be listening to a samba or a cha-cha or something else from South America. So there's an aspect of something that we can do to improve our listening experience. We see with the state of flow, there are clear goals. So I would ask, what are you listening to? Where do you think the artist is going? But even just as important, why are you listening? What do you want to get out of it? Why are you here? The next two in the list both circle around a kind of a key word to me, and that is action. Immediate feedback to one's action, and action and awareness are merged. As a listener in an audience or at home with a set of earphones on, your actions, your movements, your motions will impact how you are hearing the music. If you happen to be in a setting with other people, they'll also impact how the performer might be performing, your engagement, how the rest of the audience might be behaving. So your motion and your actions have a direct impact on how you are processing that music. And when, again, I learned that, it just told me that I need to be very specific with my actions when I'm listening to my music, whatever that music may be, in a live or recorded setting or where that might be. And as I'm deliberate with my actions, do they relate to the music that's playing and the people around me? Distractions are excluded from consciousness. Don't need to go there. There's no worry for failure. Self-consciousness disappears. Like, check your worries at the door, right? Or on the sunny side of the street. The sense of time becomes distorted. And that's where I often close my eyes. But I also turn my phone off and I don't look at my watch during a performance. I'm there to hear the music, and that's what I make a point of being present in the moment. Since the time becomes distorted, the activity becomes autotelic. Can you make your listening autotelic? Can you be able to sit down and listen and direct your attention automatically and appropriately as you listen to music? And who am I to tell you what's appropriate? That's yours. And then again, number 10, values are aligned. That's mine, not Chechen Mihai's. But yes, I still think it's important. When I'm playing music, I believe my values become aligned. I believe that music is a human necessity, and we're all here today sharing the music. And I feel such a connection with my moral values when I perform, and share that, yes, I do believe that my values become better aligned as a musician. So let's think a little further outside the box. We're in a life of improvisatory action. Every moment, we're making decisions in real time. So can we practice implicitly with our reflexes or explicitly? Can we take advantage of our emotional and our cognitive tracks to build the skill of compassion and empathy and honesty and humility? Can we better use our emotions to change our muscle and brain memory? So, are we doing this through prayer or meditation? Systematically training our brain to react with strong moral value is imperative. Can we expand this training past our practice of prayer or meditation? Can we build strong values in our everyday life by finding a way to connect the practice of strong moral values like compassion and empathy and honesty, and can we bring that practice to our everyday life? Can we attach those skills with our emotions? And I would argue that if we're only practicing our moral values when we're in prayer or meditation, I think we're missing the boat. Can we help our youth to utilize these learning tracks to become lifelong learners and positive contributors to society? And as a professor and somebody who's spent 10 years teaching pre-K to 12 music, I can say yes, we can. Obviously, skill acquisition can apply to motor skills, but what about applying it to a company or a community or a whole culture? And can we commit to the state of flow of life? And can we better focus our attention on what is important in the moment? Just a brief summary. To improve your arts experience, I recommend beginning by expanding your conceptual model. Learn more just outside your comfort zone with an open mind. Look for connections and look for the emotion in the music. I really support and strongly recommend any opportunity that you can find to bring a musical experience to young people and teach them to apply these skills. And I want to encourage you to teach by example. We're in a world right now in the process of artificial intelligence. Artificial. Right? They say that the bubble's about to burst for artificial intelligence, and some say it's already burst. What we know by looking at all this is that there is nothing artificial about art. It is part of the human DNA, and while AI is taking jobs, disrupting the economy, and so many of our society traditions are being dehumanized, we know that processing music connects directly to our memory, emotional expression, empathy, compassion, community, and basic human communication. Perhaps the arts will be our next human currency. It's far more meaningful and valuable, and can replace what the artificial intelligence may be taking, or perhaps the perception that is taking something. In a conference just recently, I was reminded of a Yale School of Music's address by a dean for their 125th anniversary. I'll give a shout out to the Dana School of Music, who's 157 years old. That was an address by Robert Blocker, who was their then dean, and he had a brilliant quote, and it was just, yes, indeed, music is the new currency of hope. So, thank you for listening. Let's all commit to making the world a better place. Music, art, theater, and storytelling are only going to help. Before questions, I thought I would play one more song. This is How Insensitive by Tom Jobim. He's a Brazilian composer. This is a bossa nova. Again, very similar to the songs that we heard at the beginning. Or what was the one I was playing beforehand? Pennies from Heaven. Very similar in structure to a lot of these. Structure, melody, harmony, right? But the rhythm's a little bit different. And again, maybe it'll encourage you to step outside the box and check out some music from Brazil and South America later on today. Thanks again. Here's one last tune, and then we'll open it for questions. you all again, and thank you for the invitation again. Questions?
I'm walking around with the microphone, so if you raise your hand, I will come to you.
So you've mentioned the music from the 50s and up through like the 60s and all that. And where do you think if we progressed more with like something like the rap music,
Sure.
is there the same message there?
Yes, there is actually. I do think that what we're doing is we're taking a moment in time. So for me, rap music is something that is steeped in some very different traditions. And in order to talk about those traditions, we'd be talking about the history of the Bronx, New York, and Brooklyn. And then from there, we'll go to the West Coast. But there are certain styles of music that impacted that. And in order to really talk about that and how to get there, we actually could go right back to, well, why don't we start with Frank Sinatra and not go too far from that? What if we get into a little bit of the R&B stuff and went to Donny Hathaway, beautiful singer, and from there we can stretch a little bit further and we can stretch to Aretha Franklin. And now all of a sudden we're actually setting up the roots of rap music, and we're getting closer and closer to R&B, which is going to get closer to hip hop, which is eventually going to stretch into that style of music that came out of the Bronx in the early 1980s, late 70s. So that's a little bit where I would go with that question. Yeah, thank you. Good question.
Do you have a favorite genre?
I played a lot of R&B, and it's got a special place in my heart for any kind of, I mentioned Aretha Franklin, but the Temptations are, all of that style of music holds a special place in me because it's a nice blend for me between the jazz roots, which I'm a trained jazz musician. They bring in a good element of classical and more of a traditional approach sometimes with orchestras accompanying. There's just a lot of various elements of the styles of music that I like.
And what do you think about
I love the Beatles. Yeah, God. And there's like, so there's a great, so there's your gateway drug, right? The Beatles, because you could say the Beatles, and all of a sudden you've got the Beatles in, and you're listening to Rubber Soul. Well, that's pretty much in the middle. You could go back, and you could go back further into like the 50s, or you can go forward into some of the albums they did after that, and you'll have to get a little bit more creative with your mind in order to put that together. In the way you're listening to it, but there's a great way to expand your listening, just with one group. It's like in music, in jazz, we would talk about like probably Herbie Hancock that way, jazz piano player, where you could just start with one genre, and just with him, you could blow up your listening vocabulary.
And we have a question right here.
Are music schools now incorporating information about the vibration of sound that is part of sound therapy and healing of the body?
Good question. So yes, a bit. More in some places than others. So for instance, and this will be me talking way from the left in the curriculum. When we talk about music theory, we can't not talk about that because that's our overtone system. That's how we hear music in terms of what set up our tonal system, whatever that was many, many moons ago. So we do talk about vibration that way. In my humble opinion, it's a real travesty that we don't go back far enough in history to really talk about how we've developed as a society. By stopping with the medieval, we're missing a lot from before that. So that's something that I think that we can incorporate more of that element. I think we should incorporate more with vibration, and I think we could actually change our music curriculum, our music theory curriculum, to actually be based on something more like that. But now I'm going to get on a soapbox, and my colleagues aren't going to appreciate it because they might not agree. Uh-huh. Yes. No, the only reason why I'm saying we can go back to do it is because I think we have a lot to learn about the development of the human being, and the development of community and society prior to the medieval times. And I think we're just missing some knowledge there of that. That's all I'm saying. I'm saying that we could do the same thing. I don't think we're missing, I think that studying the last 2,000 years is essential, and going forward is even more essential, to your point.
What's always astounded me is someone who is a musician or a singer, and I'm referring to the concert by Lady Gaga, and I believe it was Tony Bennett, where even though he was in the demential stage, he did not forget one word of his songs and was able to sing with her completely through. Nursing homes that I've been to, I've seen that same thing. But there's also those who totally have no recall. Where is that divide?
I don't know exactly, so I'm not going to try to answer this as I have the definitive answer. I see the folks where I see that come out, they have found that emotional connection that is deep in their brain, that is allowing that track to remain. And yeah, so there's the emotional track right there to me. I don't know how much of the repetition or the cognitive side has been affected, so that's where I don't want to speak definitively. But I think that emotional track, that's a really potent bit of information to know that we can process and acquire skill and maintain the skill using emotions.
We have time for one more question, so I'm going to go to my friend Barb.
Oh, okay, just to wrap up. Thank you, Dr. Joy.
Oh, thank you, Barb. I
Great
appreciate it.
Conversation. I wanted to ask you about now back to Dana School of Music. For 157 years, can you give us a little picture of what's ahead for Dana School of Music?
Yeah, I'd love to. So at Dana right now, we are steeped in we are trying our best to immerse ourselves in the community, and that's really, really important to us. We went through a bit of a tough patch not long ago, which I'm sure a lot of you heard about, but we felt as though really the strength of us during that time was we were steeped in the community, and they helped us come through, and we want to help remain a part. We always want to be a part. So that's been important to us. So we've been holding events, even last night with Carols and Cocoa. That was, I think it was over 800, about 800 last night. It was a really great crowd, more than we've had in several years. We held an Educators Day that had tons of folks. One of the things that I think you'll see is that we are embracing community. We're also embracing our traditions, things like Carols and Cocoa, but we're trying to push the envelope forward. So we want to make sure we are discussing and we are not leaving behind the subject of AI and how we are going to respond as musicians to something like that. Technology is something that we are immersed in right now. Bringing the elements of that into the traditional music education degree, bringing that into the traditional performance degree, and having that help us drive our conversations moving forward while we're still recognizing our traditions. So we have 3 degrees right now in music. We have an audio and music production degree, we have a performance degree, and we have a music education degree at the undergraduate level. And you can feel how all 3 of those degrees have become a synergy, one for the other one. Our educators are walking away with these technology skills. Our performers are walking away with pedagogical skills, as well as skills in the recording studio. And our recording engineers are collaborating with performers and music educators. And I think that that's the synergy we're really trying to build. And we want to bring that synergy into the community. Good? Okay.